I mean, I suppose you have the Mirage, the Isra and the Mirage, and riding winged beasts to Jerusalem and stuff like that. But let's just be honest. The New Testament grounds the ministry of Jesus in identifiable places and identifiable times. And that's what gives rise to all this stuff. The Quran just doesn't even bother. It's much shorter. It's mainly poetry. It just doesn't have the historical grounding or interest that the New Testament does. So it's different issue, and that's just one of the things we got to deal with. But the real issue is, what is the view of Scripture that gives rise to this timidity about affirming its accuracy? And that leads us, and again, I just point out the utilization of, here's the term, and it's first paragraph. After he talks about why are there differences in the Gospels, what we can learn from ancient biography, coming out, available December 1st, 2016. And I just wonder who's going to be using it more. Christian apologists or those we're debating. But I'm now convinced that when one reads the Gospels in view of their biographical nature, more than 90% of the differences melt away, quote, without having to resort to the sort of hermeneutical gymnastics that are sometimes performed in harmonization efforts, end quote. Now, is Dr. Licona saying that I and Lenski and many others are performing hermeneutical gymnastics? Or is he embracing a fundamental view of Scripture that is compromised at its core? That's really the question. That's really the question. And that I'm not seeing discussed. Unfortunately, everyone's all excited about pros with the accusative. That's not the issue. It's already been established without question that the text can be read the way that I have suggested, and that it does not create an internal contradiction to Mark. That to read it otherwise does create an internal contradiction to Mark. The question becomes, why would someone like Licona start there? That's the strange thing. Now, a lot of stuff has happened. Kurt Jaros got involved, and I had to look the name up, but I remembered that back in 2013, I had reviewed his encounter, I believe, with Dr. Oliphant, if I recall correctly, and unbelievable. And we had talked about the fundamental differences between a Reformed epistemology and a natural philosophy, natural theology perspective, and stuff like that. And I guess he's still a little unhappy about that. He made a number of just really unfair and untrue comments on Facebook. He seemingly knows my heart and knows what I want and stuff like that. He doesn't know me from Adam, and was just, like I said, my critics will never get me because they won't listen to what my real priorities are. Thank you. That was getting really loud. So there's been some stuff that has gone back and forth. But for me, the real issue hasn't been addressed. And anyone who has listened to this program knows that when I've interacted with Dr. Licona's debates with Bart Ehrman, with William Lane Craig, and because they're peas in a pod as far as this is concerned, my basic assertion has been, this is not how the apostles approached apologetics and the proclamation of the gospel. It just isn't. And here's why. That's the part that for some reason, silence from the other side. Silence. It's like, well, if not, big deal. And that's what concerns me. Really does. And that's what I would like to see a response to. But again, when one of the first things that Dr. Licona says is, I don't pay White any attention. I sort of don't expect much of a meaningful discussion of the real heart of my criticism. And that is, you're creating a contradiction in Mark. There is a perfectly logical way of reading this. Why would you call that hermeneutical gymnastics? You would object if anyone treated your own writings in this way. So, Dr. Lycono, why? Why? I mean, are you giving aid and comfort to our enemies? You are, but if that's your position, so does a lot of other people. In fact, let me transition at that point. Wasn't going to deal with this, but I need to. Came into the office today, and I had obviously pre-ordered this. J.R. Daniel Kirk, a man attested by God, the human Jesus of the Synoptic Gospels. Talk about giving aid and comfort to the enemy. But this isn't giving aid and comfort to the enemy. This is the enemy. Dr. Kirk teaches for Fuller Theological Seminary. Fuller denied him tenure, and everybody went, "Oh, yay, Fuller!" I told the story about last September, I believe. I come back from South Africa. The very next day, there is a debate in Scottsdale between Dr. Gagnon and Dr. Kirk. And I managed to get myself out there. Listened carefully. The debate's available on YouTube. I'd recommend it to you if you want to see the face of a thoroughly revisionistic presentation on the acceptance of homosexuality, what you have to do. What do you have to do according to Kirk? You have to be willing to say that this is a new move of the Spirit, similar to the inclusion of the Gentiles into the church. Now, of course, there was this big, long thing about prophecy of that happening, which, now I think about it, Kirk probably doesn't actually believe was prophecy. I just don't think he has a high enough view of Scripture to allow for that. But be it as it may. It's a new move of the Spirit. And that means we have to learn to speak differently than first century Christians like Paul, and even believe differently than Jesus. Well, I'm glad someone's being open about that. You need to believe differently than Jesus to do this. That's true. He's exactly right. That is what is required. Of course, that would make me wonder what the Spirit is. I think that would make that the spirit of Antichrist. But that is what it requires, is you need to think differently than Jesus. And so I went up to him at the debate, and I was like, did I just hear you say that we need to